Hello and welcome to a new vlog. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Andrea. I'm a full-time writing instructor and a part-time content creator and indie author. Welcome back if you're one of my lovely returning friends. It's great to have you all here today. It is Monday. It is a very warm, hot Monday. We're not going to talk about the weather in this vlog. I've done enough of that in the last few vlogs, but it is still very much hot summertime here in Phoenix. So I've got all the blinds closed. Even the balcony blinds are closed a little bit more than usual. I'm keeping it very dark and chill in my apartment today. I'm watching the Tour de France Femme, the women's Tour de France, and it's very rainy and misty and drizzly in the part of France that they're in right now, and I'm just kind of keeping all the blinds closed to kind of channel those more atmospheric vibes. That's what one of the commentators keeps calling it, and I'm loving it. So yeah, it's almost 2 in the afternoon. I'm getting a late start to this vlog, but I've just been puttering around the apartment. I did a workout, an aerobic workout here inside this morning, took a shower, washed my hair. I've switched out the sheets on my bed because I did some laundry over the weekend. So just some minor house admin type stuff. Made myself a yummy breakfast brunch. And I've done some like social media stuff on Instagram and LinkedIn, but now I'm ready to kind of get into the rest of my day. So quick writing update. We'll talk about this a little bit more probably later, but I have finished my draft 1.5 of Independent Hearts, which is my small town cozy romance series. For those who are new, books 1 and 2 are available now, but I am currently editing book 3. So draft 1.5 is now done. So today I need to grab my project notebook because I want to go through all the notes, go through the general notes, add some more general notes. I just want to make sure that everything that I've spoken to my alpha readers about so far, there's still one alpha reader I haven't spoken to, but I've spoken to 2 others. I want to get all of their notes in here and just like figure out what those big notes are. I want to get all my notes done today, and then I think I'm going to take tomorrow completely off that one project. I've got something else I need to work on tomorrow. That will be the next vlog. Yeah, I want to get just all my notes kind of in order in my head, in my notebook, in Scrivener by the end of today. I also need to set up my planner, so I'm going to take my planner back over to the desk, or the desk. I'm at my desk. The couch. You can tell how much time I've been spending working on my couch lately. The couch is now my desk. So I'm going to bring my planner and my little planning board and get stuff checked off because there's things that I have accomplished in both. I also wanted to spend this vlog in between me working on things. So we're gonna do the planner. I need to work on my newsletter because that's nearly done. I just need to get it done. I thought I'd have it sent out by today, and it's not. So planner, newsletter, want to do my editing notes, and I want to do some character development, some Camp Nano work. So those are the 4 big tasks today. But in between working on those tasks, I have a collection of screenshots of comments that you very kindly leave on my videos asking questions about writing, about publishing, about my process, how I do certain things, and I try to feed those questions into vlogs as like a topic to talk about in the vlog, and I've gotten a little bit backed up. So we're also going to do like a answering your questions kind of a thing in this vlog. So I'm going to answer one now and then I'll go get back to work. But Rachel asked a question, I don't know how long ago at this point, I think June 17th according to the screenshot. I told you I was backed up. Some of these are going to be even older than that. But Rachel asked, what are your thoughts on different pen names if writing different genres? Many of my book ideas are children's picture books and others are fantasy or period romance. So you're gonna find a lot of different advice on pen names. And I feel like I could do a whole video on pen names, which if you want to hear my extended thoughts on any of these topics, let me know that you want an entire video on these things. But just briefly, I think if you're writing the same, at the very least, if you're writing the same age category, like if all of your books are YA or all of your books are children's or middle grade or all of your books are adult, then you can have one pen name. Some people will say that if you write the same age category but different genres, you should have a different pen name. So like if you write romance and crime thriller, you should probably have different pen names. You could, and there are valid arguments for that. I think you have to think about how much are you going to be publishing under each specific genre versus like your total publishing. Like if you're only going to be publishing, you know, 5 books over the course of 10 years, that it might be easier for you to brand everything under one pen name. And I think if your genres aren't even that spread out, like romance, like light and fluffy romance with like true crime gritty thriller, you might want different pen names for that. But if you write romance but just different types of romance, I'd say keep it in one pen name. If you write romance and fantasy, I'd say you could keep it in one pen name. I'm writing mostly in romance, but I do have some fantasy ideas, and I'm on the fence. Part of me feels like I should follow the traditional advice of having a different pen name. I think when it comes to pen names, you have to think about how much work you're willing to put in to managing those different pen names, because each pen name is a different identity that you need to create an author platform around. So I think, Rachel, with your question, you say most of your book ideas are children's picture books, others are fantasy or period romance. I think your fantasy and period romance can be one pen name, but your children's picture books probably should be on a different pen name, just because I'm thinking if I was a consumer and I'm searching for children's picture books, it would be a little weird if then your romance and period fantasy or period romance and fantasy are popping up as well. So when your genres are that different, I'd say split up the pen names. But at the very least, if your genres are different but the age you're marketing to is all the same, like contemporary romance YA versus fantasy YA could still be under one pen name, or as I said before, romance and mysteries could be under one pen name. Not everyone's going to agree with that, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. It is a complicated topic, but just generally speaking, I feel like the general rule to follow is, at the very least, if you're within the same age range, you can have the same pen name. But if you're writing books across drastically different age ranges, you probably want to split up and have different pen names for that. I'd love to know everyone's thoughts in the comments. Do you use a pen name? What did you think about your pen name? What made you decide to choose a pen name? Because that's not one of the questions. That's not Rachel's question, but that is a whole other part of this discussion, is like, why to even choose a pen name in the first place? Or like me, I chose not to. So that's another topic, but I can answer that in another video if you want. So yeah, those are my general thoughts, quick thoughts on pen names. Really great question, Rachel. So I am now gonna go over to the couch and get settled in, get some planning done, because it's a new week and I don't have anything set up in my planner. Okay, planner is set up for the week. Planning board is adjusted. I have a new sticky note for draft 2, so I've got a whole new fresh set of check marks or check boxes that I can fill in and check off as I move through draft 2. But I want to work on some editing, so I'm at the desk. I'm gonna get stuff nice and cozy here and work in my notebook and in Scrivener and just get things ready to start draft 2 on Tuesday. But before we do that, I thought I would answer some more of your questions. Mastika asked, do you know how to care for a candle? I definitely wanted to answer this question. Do you know how to care for a candle? The wick, lighting it, blowing it out, etc. I love candles, but mine keep burning wrong and I can never get them to burn out. Maybe you can mention it in a vlog. We all know I love candles and I burn a ton of them. The biggest thing I can say for helping your candles last longer and burn better is keeping your wick trimmed. Your wick should never be more than like 1/4 of an inch long. If it gets too long, you're gonna get too big of a flame and it's gonna screw everything up. There is a science to this. I'm learning more about it in those candle making books I got. But like this candle, if you can see, the wicks aren't that high. So these ones have been trimmed. This one has also been trimmed. I use a wick trimmer like this. So this just allows me to get deeper into a candle and get a nice clean cut. You can use scissors, but when you've got the wick when it's burning down, it's going to be hard to get scissors down there. So always trim the wick before you light your candle. If it is a brand new candle, they always have more of a wick than they need. So like this one, you're not gonna be able to really see it, but this one is like almost twice the length it needs to be. So before I light this for the first time, I will trim this. So always trim your wick and then trim it before you burn it each time. For lighting candles, I have an electric lighter. I don't think what you use to light them really matters, but I'd much rather have this than one of those like big, like it's good to have something that can reach down. Like I would use matches. I like matches, but it's hard for me to get a match, especially like this one's not as good of an example, but like when this candle is down to here, getting a match, unless you have really extra long matches, getting a match all the way down there, it's not going to be that easy. Plus matches are still then something you've got to throw away. This just recharges. Like this will probably eventually die and I'll have to throw it out, but you're not throwing out one of these nearly as often as you are throwing out a disposable lighter or matches. So I highly recommend these. You just charge it up, you flip the switch, and then it just has a little electric current that runs through, lets you light the candle. So you've seen me use this a million times. For blowing out the candle, I hate the smell of candle smoke. Like when you've blown out a candle, it then covers up the beautiful scent of the candle. So I always keep the lid. So this one has a nice big lid. This one has a smaller lid, but I always keep the lid. If I have a candle that doesn't have a lid, there's always a spare lid from an old jar lying around that I can use. So I just pop the candle lid onto the candle. It starves the candle, it starves the flame of oxygen, burns out the candle. Really easy, doesn't make a mess, doesn't fill your home with candle smoke. As for burning, so like this one you can probably see there's wax that's still pretty high up, even though the candle has burned all the way to the bottom. This was a more expensive candle, whereas like this one's burning down pretty well. It's not tunneling, and this is not an expensive candle. So money does not automatically guarantee that you're going to get a really good burn. There are rules about how much space around the wick. Like this jar might have actually needed to have 2 wicks in it to get it to burn properly, the same way that this is. And these are about the same width or the same diameter. This one has 2 wicks, this one only has 1. This is something to kind of be aware of with your candles. There are ways you could make a little tent out of foil that will allow it to burn down, this bit to burn down. I did try that. It helped a little bit. You can see one side is more burned down than the other. But yeah, usually what happens when I have something like this is when the candle is completely burned out, I will scrape out the rest of the wax and I'll just put it in a wax burner because it's all just wax. The wax is still good even though the wick has burned out. So that's another tip, I think. If you have a candle that hasn't burned quite well and you're at the end of the wick but there's still wax in the candle, scrape out the wax and repurpose it in a wax melt. Other tips: the first time you burn it, you should let your candle burn at least until the whole top of the candle is melted. That will prevent the tunneling as much as it can be prevented depending on the actual construction of the candle. But then also, it's probably not best, I've broken this rule, but it's probably not best to let your candle burn for more than 4 or 5 hours at a time. A lot of times on the bottom they will specifically say don't let it burn for more than 4 hours at a time. So just being mindful of that. At the end of the day, you kind of have to play around with different brands and just see which ones seem to burn the best. I am slowly learning which brands work the best and kind of sticking with those. Those are just a few quick candle tips. Next question. Okay, so this one is from Bliss Mishler, who's a regular commenter, and they asked, considering the number and length of your chapters, what parameters do you use to define a single chapter? I wish I had an easy answer. I feel like there are no hard and fast rules to follow as far as like what determines a chapter. I'll put multiple scenes in one chapter. I'm sure some craft writer, author has tried to say that here's the exact parameters or here's the exact rules for a chapter. I go on gut and feeling and instinct. If one scene is not that long, I'll do another scene. I kind of feel like my chapters are usually at least 3,000 words long. So whatever scene I'm working on, and within 3,000, that could all be one scene, or that could be a couple scenes, or even 3 scenes. I could have 3,000 word or 1,500 word scenes in one chapter, or I could just have one 3,000 word scene. So usually what happens is once I get to around 3,000 words, I finish whatever scene I'm working on. But I also often have an idea in my head of where I want, what scenes I want chapters to end on. And so that's how I sometimes end up having 6,000 word chapters that I've got to then split up into 2 or something, because I'll decide I really want this chapter to end on this moment, but then there'll be like 3 scenes in that chapter, and one of those scenes will end up having just been a little bit longer than I anticipated. You say in your comment that you're tending to have more chapters that are shorter. I don't think shorter chapters are a bad thing. There are books that I've read where the book is like 60 chapters long, but each chapter is only like 5 or 6 pages. Like each chapter is relatively short, and so as a reader I'm flying through the chapters and it feels like each chapter is a scene, or each chapter is a moment in a scene. So there's different ways that you can approach it. I've read enough books by now to know that there are no rules about chapters. I wish I had a more specific answer, but I really don't have specific parameters. It really does come down to gut and instinct and just what feels kind of right for the chapter. So hope that helps. That's another one I could probably expand on in an entire video, so let me know. We can talk about chapters in general and chapter structure and chapter organization and length and stuff in general. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question at least a little bit. I've got a flashing battery light and I want to get to some editing work, so we will answer some more questions in a moment. I am ready to start editing. I'm not going to do that today, but I will probably do that on Wednesday. So that is all set and all ready. I'm going to set that aside, but that is what I will come back to on Wednesday. I'm going to give myself tomorrow off from looking at it at all. So let's answer some more questions. I did find another question about chapters. And again, if you want me to talk about any of this in more detail, because this question also asked if I could talk a little bit more about writing craft, that's a whole separate vlog. But I guess you can leave in the comments your specific craft questions. I don't feel like I'm an expert on craft, but I can take a stab at it. But in this question, Tampa Girl 7533, YouTube is weird now. It doesn't show me like your, just shows me your handle. It doesn't show me like your full username anymore, which is really annoying. But she asked, would you do a future vlog talking about how you're able to write chapters that makes them page turners or makes the reader want to go to the next chapter? How do you create that within your chapters? This I can answer a little bit more succinctly, hopefully. The biggest tip I have for that is basically creating a mini cliffhanger. So don't end your chapters at a natural ending point. And this goes back to the previous question about like, how long do you make a chapter? It's not about going to an end point. It's about ending at a natural, I have to turn the page and see what happens next point, if that makes sense. What are the little mini cliffhanger moments throughout your plot where everything shifts and then it shifts again and then it shifts again? It might not happen every single chapter, but I put these in my outlines as notes. I label them EOC, end of chapter, and it's the moment, the like, oh my gosh, what happens next moment that I want to end that chapter on. As a reader, I feel like if every single chapter ends that way, it gets predictable. And so you don't want to end every chapter that way. Every chapter should have something that leads them in to the next chapter, even if it's something where like they know what's happening next, but it still invites them to keep reading. If it just ends on a very boring and mundane moment, you run the risk of them putting the book down for the night and never coming back to it. So each chapter does need something that entices the reader into the next chapter, something that just makes them wonder a little bit. But like I said, every like 2 to 5 chapters, and vary it up, you know, so like chapter 2, then chapter 5, then chapter 7, you know, so it's not the same number of chapters in between, but like every so often have something that is, like if you have a major plot point, try to put that at the end of a chapter. Like if you have a major shift in the plot, shift in the character, try to put that at the end of the chapter. So don't think about chapter ends as where does the scene end. Think of chapter endings more as where is something pivotal, whether it's big pivotal or small pivotal, but where is something pivotal happening for my characters, and that's where you want to end it, so that the next chapter picks up with, okay, now this is happening. That will get readers to want to continue reading. So little mini cliffhangers, little mini plot points, plot shifts, using those moments as chapter endings rather than natural scene endings. That is my tip for how to end chapters in ways that will make your reader want to keep reading. Renee asked, how do you come up with your titles for a series and for each book? Titles are so hard. Titles are so hard. I hate coming up with titles. And I have been very, very lucky. So my friend Tamsin came up with the series title, Across the Pond. It was actually going to be the title of book 1, but then I realized it had already been used. And so I didn't want to use it as the book title, but it wasn't used as a series title, so I just switched it to the series title. And then my mom came up with A Brave Start, Brave with You, and Brave Together. And then I was able to weave those into the text of the book to make them kind of fit. But like now I have no idea what to do for book 4 because I don't want to keep the brave theme. I feel like brave is Eleanor's word, so I'm trying to come up with a word for Celeste and then a word or a theme and then tie that into the title, and then I'll have to do the same thing with book 5 and book 6. So we're not going to continue the brave theme for the next characters. Independent Hearts, that series title just kind of popped in my head because I felt like it encompassed the series. Each book was going to be a different independent small business run by an independent single woman in her quest to run her business and maybe find love along the way. And so Independent Hearts just kind of worked really well. There was like that dual play on independent businesses and independent women. So that worked out. For the titles of each of those books, I looked at kind of similar titles in that more cozy small town romance genre, books in more of the light and fluffy cozy small town romance space, and the type of titles they use. And those use a lot of titles that are like The Little Bookshop at the End of the Hill, or The Flower Shop of Wishes and Hopes, like things like that. And so that helped me create my own little formula. So I've now, for 3 books, I've only done the first 2 books. I need to be careful not to reveal the 3rd title, but mine follow the formula of the blank, insert business, of blank or blank and blank, and those are then words or themes related to the book. So the bookshop of possibilities, because possibilities is a big theme in book 1. The Inn of Hopes and Dreams, because Lydia's hopes and dreams for the Silver Stag is the main thing of that book. You know that book 3 is Elise and the Candle Shop, so it'll be the candle shop of something, and it'll be the themes of that book. So that's kind of the formula I'm following. So looking at other books in your genre and figuring out what themes and what kind of title conventions your genre follows can be a way of helping you figure that out. So I'll be doing that for the upcoming Across the Pond books because I have no idea. My Royal Romance series, I'm still coming up with the series title and the individual book titles. I'm not really thinking about that yet, but when I do come up with those and announce them, I'll let you know what my thought process was. There are resources online for like worksheets and stuff to help you come up with titles, but it's hard. I mean, there's a reason why people pay to outsource this work. You can hire someone to kind of help you with this or do this work for you. This is definitely one of the bonuses of being traditionally published because you have a whole marketing department that comes up with the titles and the taglines and the book descriptions and series titles and all of that. So as an indie, it is difficult. Okay, I'm going to do some character development, I think. Yeah, we'll do some character development in Babisco and maybe some outlining, but probably not. I think I'm gonna wait until Wednesday to do any writing. I think if I do some more character development today and tomorrow, then Wednesday we can get through the last 530 words I need to get to 15K. So I don't think I'm going to do any work in Scrivener, but I am going to do some work in Babisco and continue building out my 2 main characters. I'm done character development for the day. Making a lot of progress on that, which is fantastic. Tomorrow I need to be thinking a little bit more about plot development though, so I should make a note to myself. Yeah, character development is coming along. I've probably done at least 600 words today, but I'm in Babisco, so I'm not logging it. But we need to wrap this vlog up because I know it's gotten long. I've got 2 more questions that I wanted to answer. One is another one from Renee, who asked if I used real places for my series or if I make them up as I go. So I've done both. Obviously London is a very real place. So in the Across the Pond series, the majority of the action is set in real cities like London and Oxford. So yes, I do use real cities. I make up certain places within those cities. So the creative writing program and school that Eleanor goes to in Across the Pond Book 1, A Brave Start, is entirely fictional. The nightclub that she has her birthday party in that Celeste works at in Book 1, and in the, I think it also makes an appearance in Book 2 and maybe even in Book 3, that's made up and just based on clubs and lounges and boutique hotels that I've seen around Knightsbridge. Usually if it's something that I want to make it be something specific, I make it up. So I had very specific ideas for what I wanted the writing program that she was in to be, so I knew I wanted to just make up the school and not be bound by the curriculum and the schedule and stuff of a real creative writing program. Like I know there are places in London where you can study creative writing and get a master's degree, but I didn't want to be bound by the realities of those things. But like writing it in London, the whole point of setting it in London was I wanted to write something set in London, and I wanted to be bound by the realities and the layout and the map of London for the larger action of the book. I wanted Eleanor to visit my favorite places because, again, writing that first book, I was living vicariously through Eleanor. I wanted to revisit these places. With Independent Hearts, it was a little bit different. With Independent Hearts, I had such a specific idea for what I wanted the town to have, the types of high street it would have, the types of shops that would be on that high street, and I was very inspired by a number of small towns that I've lived in, that I've visited over the years, small towns here in the US, but also small towns in Europe, particularly England. So there are real inspirations. Mineral Point, Wisconsin is probably the biggest real life inspiration, but Olsenburg itself, which is the small town in Independent Hearts, Olsenburg itself is completely made up. And so that gave me complete freedom over what shops the town would have, what kinds of businesses, what kinds of people, what the history of the town was. So it's not, when you use real places, the risk you run is that you get a reader who also really knows that city and calls you out on any little thing you get wrong. And so I felt pretty confident in my ability to write London, but also Olsenburg, like Mineral Point is such a small town. I don't mind people knowing that like it's the inspiration, but by saying it's the inspiration, it does give me a lot of creative license. I can say, you know, some things are based on that town and some things are based on other things. It gives me wiggle room. And for that series, I really wanted that wiggle room, and I wanted to be able to do what I wanted and change things that I needed to be changed in order to fit the story and not be bound by a real town for that. So I do a mix. I make some places up and I am inspired by real places or set things in real places. Another motivation for fictionalizing certain things, like creating fictional schools or businesses or whatever, like in the Across the Pond series, there's a lot of smaller settings and locations like schools, businesses, hotels, things like that. You wouldn't want to use a real business or a real place in a negative way that could then open you up to, I mean, this is why we put disclaimers at the beginning of our books, like everything in the book is a work of fiction or is used fictitiously, you know, resemblances to real and actual places and people, you know, is merely a coincidence kind of a thing. We all have that disclaimer. But like, you wouldn't have your character work at a real company and then make everything about working in that job be absolutely horrible, because like that could essentially then end up being libel or slander or something like that. So if there's ever going to be something dramatic or negative or just other than the character having a very lovely and pleasant experience in that place, I make it up. So there's two reasons why I can make something up. Either because I'm wanting to be able to just tweak things and build things and make it exactly how I want it to be and not be bound by real life in any way, or I want to be able to use that business or make something be a more negative thing and not get into trouble or make it seem like these are my actual opinions about this business or this place or whatever, if that makes sense. So I do a mix of both, but I have very specific reasons for choosing to base something on a real location or make it up or have it be inspired by a real place but still not be completely like that place specifically. So hope that answers that question. But whether you make stuff up, like that's using real places in your books versus making stuff up, is one of the fun things you get to decide as a writer. I feel like there are pros and cons to both, and there are reasons for both. So you do want to think about, why would I use the real place versus why would I set something in a fictional place. I don't think one is right or wrong or good or bad, but there are reasons for making each of those decisions. And then the last question is one from Avi, and this is an old one according to the screenshot. Avi, I'm so sorry. I took the screenshot back in February, but I thought this was gonna be a good one to end on, and I feel like there's some things in here that I want to revisit in a future video, but this is more of a mindset question. And I think this is when I was talking about being like goal driven and a perfectionist. How do you work on your first drafts? She says, I can't seem to get past drafting as I struggle to quiet my inner critic. Love editing though, so I need to do what I hate in order to do what I love. When I draft, the prose is never as good as my perfectionistic vision. I never get over the disappointment, eventually quitting. Now I'm stuck in research mode, analysis paralysis, brain train is docked in procrastination station. Procrastination station. I mean, that reminds me of one of those old, oh, what were they called? There were these educational videos in like the 80s and 90s. Like procrastination station just reminds me of Conjunction Junction, which if anyone knows the song Conjunction Junction, anybody know what I'm talking about. But procrastination station, I love it. And she says she's eager for a jump start. I'm sure I answered this in the comments in my reply, but I did want to add this into this video because I'm sure many of you are also struggling with this, because this comes up so much. This feeling of like, I struggle with drafting, I struggle with writing, I don't know how, like I can't finish a first draft kind of a thing. Avi, I love that you say you love editing, because like editing is what I'm learning to love. I love writing. I always write too fast, and then the writing drafting phase is done, and now I'm in editing phase, and like I don't like editing as much. So I have the opposite problem, and I'm learning to love editing. But I think you've got it the easier way around, because honestly, editing is where the magic happens. Editing is where it all comes together. Writing truly is when you get past the mental blocks. Writing is the easiest part of the process. because it doesn't have to be perfect when you're writing. I think this is where I struggle with editing. Editing is where my perfectionism kicks in, because it has to be right by the time I get to the editing process. Whereas when I'm writing that first draft, I can tell myself it's just the first draft. It doesn't have to be perfect. And so I think for those of you who are struggling with drafting and have that inner critic that won't shut up, remind yourself it's just the first draft. The first draft can be bad. You talk about how your prose is never as good as your perfectionistic vision. The prose shouldn't be good. It shouldn't be perfect at the end of the first draft. No one writes a perfect first draft. I wish I could write this like on the top of everyone's arm in like Sharpie marker so that you see it when you're typing. No one's first draft is perfect. You will never, ever, 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 and this is a hill I will die on. You will never write a perfect first draft. This is what editing is for. Don't worry about the prose. Write it badly. Give yourself permission to write it badly. I'm not just talking to Avi here. I'm talking to all of you writers who are watching this. And honestly, this is a good life lesson, because most things in life don't have to be done perfectly the first time you do it. Most things you have opportunities to come back and rework it. Most mistakes aren't permanent. Most things in life you're allowed to be bad when you're starting. You know, when I was sewing, when I used to work in costume design, you made your pattern and then you mocked up the pattern in muslin or cheap cotton, and then you used basting stitches. Like, it wasn't just randomly cut out the pattern in the most expensive fabric and stitch it together and hope it worked, right? There were steps and stages where we could make mistakes and then correct those mistakes. And for some reason, writing is one of those things where we have convinced ourselves the first draft has to be perfect. Like in every other thing I've done, like costume design, like teaching, like acting, I'm just trying to think of all my different hats and different lives I've had over the past. In every other thing I've done, it has just been ingrained as part of the process that there's a process and that you're practicing and you're building and you're improving and you're making mistakes and fixing them. You wouldn't expect to get cast in a role, be given the script, and at the first rehearsal already be final performance ready, right? So in almost everything in life, we kind of expect that there will be this process, but in writing, somehow, now we just think writing has to be perfect from that first draft. It doesn't. It doesn't. So tell that voice to go sit down, and it's allowed to come back in a limited capacity when you are editing, because that is when we do want things to be nice. At a certain point, even in editing, you've got to learn how to shut that voice off, because at a certain point things just need to be done and they're never going. In all my life, I can say this with great confidence. I usually say never say never. This is one thing I do think never applies. I will never write a perfect book. I will never write what I think is a perfect book. Other people might, if I'm lucky, think that my final drafts are perfect. Other people might read, you know, one of my books here or there and think this is the most perfect book I've ever read, because we can't control how people respond to our stories. But I know in my mind, I will never write a perfect book. If I waited until a book was perfect to publish it, I would never publish. So even when editing, we have to limit that perfectionist voice and say that it's done. It might not be perfect, but it's good enough and it's done and I'm moving on. But while you're writing, definitely don't listen to that perfectionist voice, because the writing, outlining and writing is not where that voice belongs. So yeah. Anyway, this video has gotten very long, but I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm gonna wrap this up really quick. You can answer any of these questions. If you have answers of your own to any of these questions, feel free to share your answers down below or expand on anything I've said or advice I've given. I would love to see that. You can leave some writing and reading related emojis to let me know which one of you lovely people have made it all the way to the end of this vlog. I will show you what I get up to the rest of this evening, but it's just gonna be a cozy, quiet at night at home. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. All of those great things. I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next vlog. Thank you very much for watching this one.